All right, folks, I think we're finally live. And I misspoke last week. This week I have Andy Maidment on, not Sherry Tolson Reich. So that's next week. I got my week screwed up somehow. Anyway, so what do you say we get this ball rolling? We'll start the recording and we'll bring Mr. Maidment up. All right, give me just a moment. I got to make sure I got the right. Okay. Now I know which song I'm going to play, so there we go. There's that. Here we go. All right, good evening, everyone, in the live stream, and welcome to another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Yeah, I'm already starting off with a bang here. So anyway, this week, happy to have Andy Maidment, who is out of the Libertarian Party, and he is running for the Missouri 6th U.S. Congressional. Why am I pronouncing words weird? Congressional District. So, Andy, sir, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. I'm pretty sure that I will be pronouncing some stuff a little weird tonight, too. Don't worry.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad it's not just me, because that is embarrassing. Trying to look professional, and I look like a fool. So, right off the bat, we got Voodoo Queen, we got Ganai, and Warrior Class 3 in the house with us. So, Andy, I guess to start off the show, let's start off with a little bit of your background. And then we'll get into, and then if you want to, you can just go right into the reason or the reasons that you chose to run in a political race.
Okay. I am, first of all, I'm a father. I have a son who has just turned 14 years old a couple weeks ago. And, I've spent a good portion of his life, actually more than his life, in military service. I served active duty and then came to the Missouri National Guard after 4 years. And I've spent, of my National Guard time, pretty decent amount of time on active duty, which is kind of not how the Guard is supposed to work. But I have a degree in history and a minor in economics. And basically what it comes down to is I've always been interested in politics. I have always, had something to say about what's going on in the world. And I just look at things and I we can see things that are pretty obvious that this doesn't work. Like we know this doesn't work. We've seen this before. Why are we doing it this way? And nobody's doing anything about it. And that's pretty much why I decided to make the run. I did get a call from some members of the Libertarian Party asking, hey, there's a few districts that you're in that no one's running for. Would you like to run? And that kind of surprised me. I looked at it and decided I'd take the big one. That's just what it came down to. It was like they said, hey, we need people to run. We need, you've been a member of the party for a long time. Would you like to get more involved? So.
Interesting. So is there any one topic? Because the reason I ask is as I've been interviewing people, there's been one recurring theme, one thing that happened that made them decide to run for either state house, Congress, U.S. Congress, whatever. COVID is the recurring theme. Did that have anything to do with your reasoning to run? And did that solidify things in your mind?
I wouldn't say COVID solidified anything. I would say it was just a symptom of the greater issue. The big things for me are one, the Second Amendment. I'm a huge supporter. I just finished building a ghost gun yesterday, so that's my thing. And then the other thing for me, having spent 21 years in military service, I feel like the procurement process and all the way in which the military spends money is hugely mismanaged. It has been hugely mismanaged since before the war on terror. That made it worse. Basically they got a blank check and they've been like, kid in a candy store ever since. And those two things are probably the big thing for me. Like I said, the Second Amendment. I've been a huge fan of the Bruin decision. I don't think it went far enough. And just the fact that not just the military, but that's the one I'm very familiar with, but the entire federal government just spending our great-grandchildren's money like it's not even a big deal.
So I'm guessing so. Then you're a fan of Missouri's SAPA law. Then I'm sure you're a huge fan of that because I know all of us here are.
You'll have to.
The Second Amendment, Second Amendment Preservation Act, which basically, keeps the state from,
from assisting the ATF in violating our rights.
Yep. So I kind of figured you were a big fan of that one. If you're, if you like the Second Amendment, then you gotta respect SAPA. That's the thing. The Second Amendment Preservation Act is. We are it in the state of Missouri as far as the strength of the bill. I know that others are out there trying to enact a law like this, but it does not have the teeth that Missouri's does. And on that note, why don't you just give us your thoughts on, the same thing plays out over and over again. As far as you have a mass shooting, and then the government's like, "Whoa, we need more gun control. We need more background checks." Give me your opinion on why they, how they're getting it wrong, and how, because I get it. DC is a monstrosity, and I think the best we can hope to do is slow the beast down. But give me your insight on the Second Amendment, what Congress has been doing, what the president's been fighting for and yelling and screaming about. Give me your take on all this.
Well, the only thing I will say to that is, like I said earlier, I just built a ghost gun yesterday. For anybody out there who's a fan of Firefly, you can't stop the signal. It's already out there. People know how to do it, whether you've got 3D printers or CNC machines or just basic stuff like P.A. Ludi over in Britain had. He didn't have CNC machines or any of that kind of stuff. He just built a machine gun out of, stuff he could find at the hardware store, and, was arrested and died in prison for it. But, the information is out there, and, as much as they may want to stop it, the only way they're going to stop it is if they violate a lot more than just the Second Amendment. So you basically just have to accept this. Criminals are going to get guns. Why? Because they're criminals, and it makes their life easier. So if it makes their life easier, and they're criminals because they're doing crime is easier than working, that's what they're going to do. And taking away rights and taking away mine and my fiance's and my mother's ability to defend ourselves is never ever going to fix that. Like you said with the SAPA law, if the states don't want to participate, then that's their right. It doesn't stop the ATF from going out and doing that stuff, but the fact is that they don't have the people necessary to enforce all the laws they want to, and they need our local law enforcement for that. And now they can't help. And I'm very happy that our law has so many teeth to it. It would be a horrible expense for the typical police officer to pay that fine that goes with that. So I'm very happy about that. As much as I have several friends who are law enforcement officers, even a couple of friends who are federal law enforcement officers, I just don't see how we can countenance people going around and violating our rights, especially, like I said, in light of the Bruin decision. that says that it is an individual right, and that individual right includes the right to bear. So.
Okay, so I've already got a question because the guy said, okay, and Andy's good on gun rights. What about your thoughts on this? Is a big topic on this show. The war
Oh, yeah.
on drugs. What are your thoughts on the war on drugs?
So that's the nice thing about being a libertarian that they're probably going to like is that I don't care what people put in their own bodies. If you want to smoke a plant or if you want to snort a powder or whatever, as long as you're doing it in the comfort of your own home and you're not bothering anybody and you're not beating your kids or anything like that, do what you want to do. It's your life, not mine. I don't know how to run your life. I barely know how to run my life. So, I mean, I'm divorced. It was not a good situation, and I understand that, and so I want to not only get the government out of my life, I want to get it out of your life, because there's no way that some guy 1,400 miles, I forget how far away DC is. There's no way that a bunch of people that over in DC 1,000 miles away know how to run your life better than you do right here.
Okay, yeah. Because I'll tell you, Andy. The funny thing is I've interviewed you and Robert are the only two libertarian candidates that I've interviewed so far. Everybody else has been running on a Republican ticket. Now, Robert, yourself, and I know Brandon Wilkinson, no likey the war on drugs. A lot of the ones running for all of the ones running for state office besides Robert said, I mean, I could follow along with them on everything else, but once we got not to drugs, just to when I would ask them about the legalization of recreational marijuana, they just they said no. I've seen what it does to people, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe heroin, maybe crack, but weed. What's the worst that's gonna happen? I mean, seriously, what is the worst that's gonna happen?
Well, that's the thing. I've definitely seen people, like, believe me, I was in the Army. I've seen people who before they even enlisted, like, they'd smoke their brain away. Like, it happens. But like, it comes down to who owns your body, you or the government? And the answer is you. The government does not own your body. It wants to own your body because the government is made up of people, and people have like desires to control other people. But it is your body. Like during COVID, they were saying, please don't inject yourself with bleach, because that was apparently something that somebody came up with. You know what? If you want to inject yourself with bleach, go ahead. Just don't ask me to pay for it when you go to the hospital.
Okay, yeah, because the question is, would you support legislation ending drug laws? I mean, would you support something like that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I honestly, I'm not even a fan of having, like drug laws for like prescription drugs. Like it shouldn't really be up to the FDA what medications you can and cannot take. And I will say this because of my military service. I knew someone that I deployed with. We were in two separate places. He ended up, he was far south Iraq. I was kind of central Iraq. But we came back and I continued serving with him for several months before I went to another unit. He ended up with a very rare form of cancer for which there was no FDA-approved treatment in the United States. There was a treatment in Germany that was approved by their, whatever their version of the FDA is, and he was seeking to go over there and do that. But because it wasn't approved by the FDA, TRICARE, which is the military insurance system, wouldn't let him do it. He actually had to call his congressman at the time, was Ike Skelton, and get him to basically call the TRICARE and say, let him go do this. It's first of all, it's going to be halfway subsidized by the German government, and it's not going to be that expensive compared to a lot of other cancer treatments. Just let him go do it. So it comes down to that whole COVID thing of like, the mandate, and I know this. I've been listening to the show ever since we talked. with the mandate for the vaccine. Like, it should not be up to the government what you can and cannot put into your body. And that goes for drugs, that goes for vaccines, all that stuff. Like, it's your body. Let's, if you have a treatment for something that is going to kill you, like it was going to my friend, and it's just, the FDA hasn't approved it, you know what? Let them try it because there's nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not a big fan of the pharmaceutical companies and some of their tactics. I'm not a big fan, but I am with you that if there's something out there that could possibly help someone, why do we have some bureaucrats saying, well, to me, all it is, it's about money to begin with. Well, somebody didn't bribe us enough to let us, let you take that yet, so you can't have it until they bribe us enough. To me, that's all it is. And
that's part of the thing. Is like you talk about the tactics, like that's what it is. It's the same reason why Jeff Bezos wants a $15 an hour minimum wage across the country, because he can afford that stuff. Like he's going to pay or influence the government to the point where he can make that happen. That's the same thing the pharmaceutical companies are doing. They're influencing the government to the point where you have to take their drug. Why was that one guy able to increase the cost of, oh gosh, what was it?
Insulin?
Was it insulin? Yeah, it was like insulin, or was it epinephrine or something like that?
Either one of them.
Take it from like $30 a shot to $1,300 a shot. Why? Because the FDA, he was the only one approved by the FDA to produce it. But it's this drug that's been made for over 100 years. So why is that the case? Because the FDA gets to say.
Yeah. Okay. So I got another question. A question is, would Andy support Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill to end the ATF? What are your thoughts on a bill that ends the ATF?
I would love to end the ATF. And it's one of those things where it's like, I almost feel like, well, something would have to take its place. But then I go, well, why? Yeah. Their job is basically to enforce federal law on alcohol, tobacco, firearms. Why do we need federal law on any of that stuff?
See, this is, you're making this almost every week's been a challenge. Well, I shouldn't say a challenge, but I get answers from some people and I go, oh, and I roll my eyes and we're just flowing. You're making this too easy and too fast. Come on, Andy, make it harder on me. Man. No, it's cool. It's fine. Okay, I want to ask you this, and I'm not bashing you because of the party you run in. Okay. What are your thoughts? Because we saw what happened with the National Party. The Mises Caucus just swept the National Party. A, what are your thoughts on that? And B, what are your thoughts on that at least the LP at the national level and a lot of state levels during lockdowns, shutdowns, vaccine mandates, a lot of the state parties and the National Party was just eerily silent. What are your thoughts? Because I always want to ask libertarians this. I always have conservatives on. I don't get to ask a libertarian this much. What are your thoughts on the way they acted during the whole supposed COVID crisis?
So I think that the leadership that they had before this last convention was. The problem is they don't know how to lead. They didn't know necessarily how to take a stand on an issue. Like there were things that were definitely like, this is a libertarian issue. This is something we can all agree on, and we're not worried about whether this is going to be something that alienates some of the people that we would expect to be our supporters. And I think they were a bit more worried about that fringe. I don't want to say fringe, but there's definitely a portion of the party that, just like anything, you've got a spectrum, right? You've got Republicans who think, oh, a little bit of gun control is okay. You've got Republicans who are, frankly, buds, and they're like, well, as long as they've got their bolt-action rifles, they're fine. And then you've got Republicans who are like, we need to repeal the NFA and have machine guns. Libertarian Party is the same way. There's a spectrum, and I think they were, they were paralyzed by because one of the features of the Libertarian Party is we all hate each other, and which is it's kind of a joke, but like when I first really started getting into like some of the social media of libertarians, like I was just aghast at how often it was like, well, that's not really libertarian, and I'm like, okay, that's what socialists say about each other too, because they, like socialists don't want to admit that National Socialists are socialists, like, but they are, and so the libertarians, that you have that same way, like everybody's got their orthodoxy that they think is right, and I think that maybe they were just kind of responding to that whole like you're not libertarian enough or you're not really libertarian kind of thing, and they didn't want to alienate anybody. So and that's not like a diss on them as like libertarians or as like liberty loving people or anything like that. It's just it's saying if you're not willing to take a stand and say this is what I believe, then you're not fit to be in a position of leadership.
Yeah, because my thing is from my I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party. Now I love some of the principles, the non-aggression principle, things like that. Love it. But it seemed like the National Party, was more left-leaning, like Sarwark and some of them, because it wasn't okay. So some of it was inaction, some of it was, I guess, some of them acted like, well, this is political suicide if we come out against mandates and lockdowns. Okay, but then you start seeing them say, the National Party, some of these people are bigots and they're racist, and I'm like, oh my God, you sound like the left. You sound like the left. What is your deal?
So there's definitely a lot. It's the thing about the Libertarian Party. We bring in a lot of people from the left. We bring in a lot of people from the right, which I'm not going to get into it right now. But I think left and right are useless terms in the modern discourse. But we bring in a lot of people from both sides of the duopoly, and I think there was definitely a much more left, former Democrat kind of leadership previously, and now we've got kind of a more right, former Republican leadership, or would be Republican if there wasn't a Libertarian Party. Is probably what.
Yeah, old school conservative, basically.
Yeah, classical liberal.
Yeah, there you go.
I think with the Mises Caucus is kind of what they really are, and so now I forget where I was going with that. Now that I explained it all. I do that to myself sometimes.
Yeah, I do too. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
Yeah. Point being, like that previous leadership, they definitely came from that side, and it's possible that maybe they really did believe that they're going to alienate themselves by coming out of it, because if they're coming from that side and those are the people they know, then they're definitely going to alienate those people. But I mean, you look at it now and how much people are, especially here in like this region, maybe not in New York. I've got a lot of family in New York, and they think that the lockdowns and all that stuff made sense and all that. But from the rest of the country, like if you'd come out against it, you would be riding this wave of anti-authoritarianism, anti-authoritarian feeling that's coming out as a result of all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've got another question. So there's been talk of trying to make gold and silver a legal tender in Missouri. What are your thoughts on that? And we also had a push last year, which the bill it died. They were trying to remove the sales tax on groceries. What are your thoughts on those two things? What are your thoughts on those?
So I'll need to do the groceries one first. I don't like the idea of picking winners and losers. It's not the government's job. If the solution is to lower taxes on one thing, the solution is to lower taxes on everything. So whether it's groceries or clothes or cars or computers or whatever, like if taxes are too high on something, then taxes are just too high. the government's job is not to pick a winner or loser. The government's job is simply to be an impartial arbiter between the people and defend the people's liberty. That's the government's job. So, I mean, honestly, I would love to see us reduce the size and scope of government enough to the point where we don't have taxes, but I realize that that is a long distant goal. So if we're talking about getting rid of taxes on groceries, let's just lower taxes across the board. As far as having a gold standard or silver standard, I think that would, in the short term, definitely, that would have a shock to the system that is used to the fiat currency. However, there is precedent in U.S. history for having local currencies alongside the U.S. dollar. There didn't used to be enough dollar coins that the government would mint to go around, and you actually had banks that would, print their own dollars that were to be backed by land or silver or some other commodity or something, and they would hold their value that way. So there is precedent for doing something like that, and I'm not opposed to it as long as we can figure out an appropriate medium of it, or not medium, rate of exchange, and a way of doing that efficiently. And I think that's kind of what Bitcoin was supposed to be, but it hasn't worked out that way for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's again, the nice thing about Bitcoin is it's decentralized, but it's still tied to a fiat currency, which when you have what we have going on now and Bitcoin takes a dump, well, it's directly tied to a fiat currency. So there's a group. I was talking to you a little bit ago. I mentioned the Missouri Freedom Initiative. They're working on a bill so gold and silver would run side by side with the dollar. So it's kind of you have the dollar, or you could use gold and silver or whatever, and you wouldn't be eliminating one. It's kind of, I guess, our way of a little bit of a hedge against inflation or devaluation of the fiat money that we're all used to using right now. So it's one of the things that they're currently working on, and I know they've got an outline for the bill, and that's something that a lot of others are becoming interested in because of the feds just can't stop wasting and peeing money down a rat hole you're running for Congress and we're talking about spending money. Let's get into the whole Ukraine thing. What? Not just the money that we're giving them every time we turn around, because it was just another $1.5 billion. They said, we're going to send them another $1.5 billion for the healthcare workers in the Ukraine. What are your thoughts on the whole Ukraine situation? Because I'll give you my take real quick. I don't like Putin. I think Putin, I don't like him, but I don't like Zelensky either. I don't think he's a good guy either. And I just think this is a situation that we need to stay out of. We don't need a proxy war with Russia. But I have a feeling that there's a lot of money laundering going on between the U.S. and the Ukraine. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on this whole Ukraine thing and how much the billions of dollars we're sending their way?
Okay, so the first thing I will say is that I absolutely think Putin is a bully. I can't believe that anyone didn't believe he was going to do this, because he's done this at least 4 times that I can think of off the top of my head. Twice in Georgia, once in Kazakhstan, and once before in the Ukraine. And so I can't believe that anybody thought that this wasn't going to happen. Like they built up, an army on the border of the Ukraine the size of the active duty U.S. Army, and last year, and the idea that our defense apparatus, the military industrial complex was surprised by his invasion is ludicrous to me. So that tells me right there that the wrong people are in charge there. So so we need to get some more liberty-minded and forward-thinking people into the Senate. So Jonathan Dine's running for Senate. So if you guys want to check him out, Um, but the thing that surprised me about it was the fact that he went in February and not December, because like Ukraine is a giant plain. It's like northern Missouri, where the 6th district is. Which, if you've ever been, I know most people probably haven't. If you've ever been to the Truman training site up in it's a little north of Kirksville, I think, if I remember right. Like, if you drive a army truck in off the road in that thing, you just sink into the mud. It's that same kind of ground. So the fact that he went in February is the only thing that surprises me. So things had started to thaw. It was muddy, and that's one of the reasons why the invasion has bogged down so much, is their tanks can't maneuver the way they need to. But I think once the ground dries up in the summer the way it's supposed to be, that the Ukrainians are in for a shock. But as far as us just sending money over to the Ukraine, like that's a foolish idea. It's just like everything else our government does right now. We're borrowing money from our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, to do the things we want to do now. And as much as I honestly believe that Putin is a bully, and it would be wonderful if the Ukrainians just utterly stopped him in his tracks. We don't need to be sending billions and billions of dollars that we don't have to help them. Now, if Ukrainians want to buy this stuff with their own money, I'm all for it. Like, we can go ahead and sell them all the Javelin missiles that they can afford to buy. That's great, but we don't need to be just handing out money. That goes along with what I believe about foreign aid in general. There's a long running school of thought as far as foreign aid goes of, if you start sending a whole bunch of money to a country that's developing, in the typical cases like Africa, when you study this stuff, then the governments aren't beholden to their people, because that's not where they get their money and their budget and everything. They're beholden to the World Bank or the IMF or the United States or something like that. And that's a recipe for corruption. That's a recipe for revolution, and, just making things even worse than what they already were. And it's a bit of a different situation from the Ukraine, and I admit that. But that doesn't change the fact that, if they want to buy the weapons, that's great. Like, even if we want to finance it, that's fine too, as long as they win the war. We can do that too. But our grandchildren shouldn't be paying for Ukrainian independence.
Yeah, and it goes along with the proxy war that we give or sell the weapons to Saudi Arabia, and they're over there raining hell down on Yemen, and we have people that are upset about Ukraine, and the people in Yemen are sitting there like, excuse us, hello,
yeah,
they're raining hell down on us, and what do you got? Nobody's paying attention. Like, excuse us.
And the other problem with proxy war, just to bring it back around, the other problem with proxy war is that you run into situations like what Barack Obama did. I mean, Barack Obama built ISIS by arming proxies against somebody that they thought was a bad guy, which is Assad in Syria. And oops, now we've got all these people who are fighting Assad, and they went, oh, we're winning, let's expand. And we ended up, I ended up on my third deployment going and supporting the war against ISIS. So we have a very short-sighted and narrow view when it comes to foreign policy in the United States, and that's something that needs to be fixed. We unfortunately came out of World War II thinking we could fix the world, and that's we've by and large, we've done some good things, but by and large we've really been short-sighted and done some very foolish things since then.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about, like one of the moments I remember from 2012 when Ron Paul was running and him and Giuliani had their little moment on stage, and Ron Paul's up talking about blowback, and everybody's just like, oh, crazy old Uncle Ron. But it's like, The guy's pretty much right. Every time he says this
Yeah.
is going to happen, it freaking happens. It happens every
Yeah.
time. And then we went, oh, crazy Ron. But he's right. It's one of those things, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But at the same time, we give them weapons, we give them money. They turn on us, and then they act shocked. And it's like, you knew they didn't like you to begin with. Why are you acting surprised now?
I mean, if there's any evidence that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, just remember that the Iranians and the Israelis cooperated to destroy Saddam Hussein's nuclear power plant. So, like the Iranians provided the intelligence the Israelis needed to go bomb it. So,
and then
and they hate each other.
Yeah, they absolutely hate each other. One of the other things too, when you're talking about foreign aid, is especially in these third world countries where I actually work with some guys that are from different parts of Africa that have come here and become citizens, and they talk about just the gangs in these different areas. Like one of the guys was telling me a story the other day, and he's like, he's just trying to drive. He said you're walking somewhere, and he's like, if somebody stops you and says, nice shoes, take them off, he's like, you take them off. And I know that we've...
and that's where the Second Amendment comes in, because that doesn't happen in the U.S.
Right. And the other thing is, too, is they talk about, we give these sometimes dictators money. The money doesn't go to the people. The dictators buy arms, they buy weapons, and they're just still dictators. The people themselves aren't benefiting from this money. And I know that some people, when I say we need to stop handing out money to a lot of these nations, people are like, whoa. And I'm like, do you think the people actually get that money? Do you think they actually benefit? Because probably 90% of the time they don't. They don't get anything out of that money. We're just, like you said, we're buying friends, kind of.
Kind of, with our grandchildren's money.
Yeah, with our grandchildren's money. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you just want to, like, a good example of that, I'm just remembering the 80s with the Marcos, president of the Philippines.
Yep.
His wife had how many thousand pair of shoes in the presidential palace when he was deposed? I mean, I don't remember exactly. I remember it being more than 1,000, but it was a lot, and that's where the money went. With our the money we paid them for basing rights and various other things. So that's where the money goes. And it's not even always the foreign aid. Like I worked with a guy from Kenya for a while, and really good dude. He lives here in the U.S. He works in IT, and he started a school in Kenya to help people, in his home country, kind of learn IT stuff in order to, get into the developing workforce, the modern world. And, in order to get internet service for his school there in Kenya, he had to bribe all these, government officials, because, the phone company was a government-run company. It was technically a company, not the government, but it was a company, and that's one of those things. Like, every time somebody's like, well, we need socialized medicine, all that. Like, really? Is that what you really want? Because I can tell you what happens when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, COVID is a prime example of government intervention into medicine. I'm sorry, but that is absolutely the case. When I still hear people saying, we're still hearing this Medicare for all, and I'm like, everything we just went through, those are the people you want to run healthcare. And then I saw a video the other day where this guy was like talking about how Republicans didn't want it wasn't a gun problem, it was a mental health problem. And then he goes, okay, well then would these Republicans be on board with a universal mental health care system? And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? These are the people. We've already had an issue with the Affordable Care Act. Now you want to put them in charge of a universal basic mental health care system. Of all the people in the world, these morons, these are the ones you want writing the law? It just mind-blowing.
It comes down to, there's a few things about it. One, the Obamacare. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the act, but
Affordable Care Act.
Thank you. I always try to use the actual word because when you use Obamacare, people just kind of tune you out. So yeah, with the Affordable Care Act, like it was one of those things. Like, I wonder how much the insurance companies paid into Barack Obama's PACs and all that to get him elected, because that law was basically written to make them money. And I say to make the money. I mean, I think it was really written to make the money in the short term. I think it was really written to break the system in the long run. So to the point where, the whole system fell apart, and people begged for socialized medicine. But I think that's what I think the intent was. But I mean, honestly, it's like, how is the people not do? Like, you have to buy health insurance. The government is mandated that you buy health insurance from a private company. Like, you don't get a choice on it. Like,
I know. And then the other part is too that
understand.
how many insurance companies did we have in the beginning in the healthcare marketplace? Like here in Missouri, I think you have literally one company to choose from. And because of government intervention,
if you want to be in the marketplace.
Yeah, and because of government intervention, they didn't incentivize like a free market would for this competition. No, they eliminated the competition and awarded it all to one company gets everybody's. And it's like, you think that's cool? You think that's cool? I mean, I don't understand why people think that's okay to do that.
And I think that it wasn't that they incentivized the one company. I think it was Blue Cross Blue Shield, which I think they sort of have this kind of mandate in the way that they work, like their internal mandate, not a government mandate, that they will provide insurance to people who will pay for it. And I think that's the reason they participate. I think if it hadn't been for that, there would have been no one in the Missouri marketplace, actually. And forgive me if I'm wrong on that. It's been now 12 years since the law was passed, and 8 since it went into effect. So, if I'm wrong on the reason why they joined in, but I believe that was why. It was because they have this, that's their thing. They're going to provide insurance to people who will pay for it. And I think that's the only reason they even had one company join in. Because when you look at it, and I'm going to go back to all the Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh talking points. Like, what does a man need? Birth control coverage for? What does a man need pregnancy control for, or pregnancy insurance for? They don't. But it's on your insurance because it's mandated by law. So.
Yeah, not to mention that, Obama made these insurance companies sound evil, but from my understanding, they were the ones that helped write the legislation. So
and
the insurance
they
companies
were all seeing dollar signs.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, because the government's mandating it. That means everybody has to buy insurance.
Yeah.
That was a win-win.
Anytime you see one of these giant, far-sweeping laws, the one I always love to talk about is, see, this is why I know this is my first interview, because I can't remember this stuff. Dodd-Frank, that's it, Dodd-Frank. The Dodd-Frank Act was written by bankers, literally. Like Chris Dodd, my dad lived in Connecticut. He was a professor up in Connecticut when that was passed, following the
housing market crash?
Yeah, and so, Chris Dodd was one of the most corrupt men ever to serve in the Senate. And that's saying a lot when you look at some of the people that served in the Senate in the 19th century. All right? But he was one of the most corrupt. He was in the back pocket of Wall Street. If you want to talk about somebody, everybody talks about, the Republicans, they're all pro-corporation. Blah, blah. No, Chris Dodd was a Democrat, and he was absolutely in their back pocket. He's dead now, if I remember correctly. So I think I can say that without any kind of libel or anything. He's also a public figure, so I think I can avoid it that way. But he seriously, that law was written by bankers. And anyone who's actually looked at that law knows that. Uh, so,
Yeah, now,
um,
and that brings up another topic, this inflation right now. I was listening to a
mhm,
podcast this morning on the way to work, and they were talking about,
mhm.
the government's saying inflation is at 9.1%. And they were talking
Is that
about,
all?
yeah, they were talking about the CPI, and uh, Greenspan had wrote some, they enacted a way that they were going to do all this figuring. The things they left out
Mhm,
of their figures was the prices, the price to buy a house,
mhm,
housing prices, a market rent value. So they eliminated
mhm.
some things basically so they wouldn't have to admit that inflation was so
So,
high, people wouldn't get mad at them, and they wouldn't have to increase Social Security benefit
mhm,
payments because inflation was so high. But I
right.
can't remember the name of the website off the top of my head. There's a website. This guy tracks it, but
Mhm.
he takes a better look. He said 17.4% is the actual inflation rate right now, not 9.1 that the government states.
I would be
17.4%.
I would honestly that seems about right to me. Honestly, I bought a house in 2016 down right on the edge of Kansas City, kind of right on the edge of the sixth district, and uh, I bought it in 2016 for $100,000. I sold it this year for $180,000, and because my fiance and I bought a house together, and I didn't need that house anymore. I bought that house with the idea of I'm going to rent it out, and that's just a whole nother series of other issues, just the managing of the property and all that I decided I didn't want to deal with. When I bought the house, that house could have legitimately rented in that neighborhood for about $1,000 a month. Right now, $2,200 a month easily. That's to get somebody renting it like that week. If I wanted to wait a month or so to get somebody $2,500 a month, that's an incredible increase over the course of 4 years, and most of that is since COVID, since they started printing $9 trillion. Um,
Yeah.
and I think we're actually getting close to 10 trillion at this point. But yeah, that's a ridiculous number. I can't even imagine. Like, we got our house kind of towards the beginning of all that, and we got a good price for it. I think, considering what things have gone to recently and what other houses in the same neighborhood are selling for now, I can't even imagine. Like I know it's not affecting me as much as other people, but it's affecting me a heck of a lot more than than people in DC who are earning their whatever $175,000 for being a congressman and whatever other investments and everything else they get inside tracks on and all that. So, and I guess that's kind of my my uh, selling point, I guess I'll say, as far as running is I'm just a guy. I'm just, I work in IT. I make a decent living working IT, but I'm someone that this inflation still affects. Whereas people in DC, people have been there for 22 years, like my opponent, Sam Graves, it really doesn't affect him the same way that it affects the rest of us. And so, when you look at the $7 trillion that was spent on the war on terror, and everything else that the government's been doing since then, it doesn't affect him the same way that it affects me. It doesn't affect him the same way that it affects the rest, everybody else. I mean, not that it doesn't affect him; it still costs him however much money to buy his pickup truck or whatever. But it's a much smaller deal to him than it is to the rest of us, especially after 22 years in DC.
Okay, Warrior Class 3 says, "Ask my question, John," but I don't I don't see your question, bro. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I missed it, Warrior Class 3. I apologize. So, I'm asking if you support the the Founders Republic. In that regard, does he believe that our current open border enhances the Founders' vision, or does it turn us into a third world banana republic?
I don't think it. I don't know that necessarily the border is open. I think there's a really nuanced discussion to be had about the border. And on the one hand, as far as people coming to the United States, coming for citizenship, coming for services, all that kind of stuff, there's definitely a real problem. If it's just people who just want to come here to work and then go home, I guess I'm looking at this from a historical perspective and just to let everybody know, I watched last week's show today to be ready. I know this was talked about. So there used to be the idea of the revolving door, and people would come across the border and they would work in the fields or the processing plants for the chickens or whatever, and then when that work wasn't there anymore, they would go home for a little while. And so now we have a much bigger problem. Is like now people are here and they stay here, and as much as I don't really think that's a problem necessarily, let me back up. I mean, I'm almost responding to last week's show. Like I said, I watched it today. As far as getting citizenship and getting the right to the services and all that kind of stuff that people get with citizenship, one, we probably shouldn't have all those services. That's, like I'm not a huge fan of the social safety net. But as far as like getting people citizenship, I think it should be a lot easier to get into the United States, but everyone should definitely have to go through the citizenship process to get citizenship. It's not a matter of you get here and then you claim some special status and then you get to be a citizen, you get to claim all kinds of services and stuff. No, we can't do it that way. Everybody's got to go through the same process. So I hope that answers your question, and I feel like I'm cheating them a little bit because I'm kind of responding to, like I said, last week's show too.
Oh, that's fine. Now, do you have more time to hang out? Because I've got a clip at 56 minutes, but I can go on from there.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I'm good to hang out.
Okay, so.
I'm good until you're too hot in your room and you're sweating too much.
Okay, you really did watch it. Good Lord, you sir did your homework. I'm impressed. Here's my thing, and I know you're responding a little bit to what we talked about last week, and just hearing stories from people that I've worked with. Now, I haven't done the research myself yet. There are some people who are saying that if we keep letting people in willy-nilly, that it is going to crash the economy. Now, I haven't studied it. I'm not saying that those people are lying to me because they may have done way more research than I have, so I don't know. Have you heard anything like that, or have you read anything like that? If we would just let whoever wanted to come in, would it crash the economy?
So I've heard this before, and I think there's a few caveats to that. One, if those people keep coming in and they keep using our social services, which again I don't think there should be, then I think there's definitely a potential for that. If, on the other hand, we were to have something like a free market, and that's a whole nother discussion about that comes up a whole lot. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I've sparred with a bunch of socialists on this. But there are many forms of capitalism, and the one we're in is not a free market capitalist system. It's still capitalism, but it's not free market.
It's crony capitalism.
Yeah. As mixed socialism, as they like to call it, or not mixed socialism, mixed economy. And excuse me. But if we had an actual free market system, then more people come in. It doesn't matter. The market adjusts as necessary. It changes the way that housing works so that housing stays affordable. It changes the way that food works so that food stays affordable. I mean, it's Adam Smith's invisible hand. Like, like more people will start moving into apartments. Apartments will get built, meaning that apartments will stay at a, relatively affordable level. There's a whole bunch of stuff going, but you need an actual free market for that to work. And the crony system that we have now, or mixed system, whatever you want to call it, it's not nearly as capable as responding to that. Even with politicians recognizing there's a problem and going, hey, there's a problem, let's do something about it, let's put money into it. Well, they're taking money from something else and causing that to go up in price. That's just not the best way to do it. I was thinking about this earlier in the show, and I wanted to bring it up. Robert Heinlein, who wrote Starship Troopers, also wrote a book, or I think it was a short story, called Glory Road.
Hey, can you hold that thought real quick, because I got a clip
Sure,
here in about 30 seconds. So, folks,
Sure.
Those of you in the KEYK audience, thanks again for joining me this week for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Next week, I will have on Sherry Reish, and she is a Republican running again for the U.S. House of Representatives. She will be joining me next week. We'll see you all next week. Take care. Have a great week. And... All right, go ahead and finish your thought. I just had to clip there at 56 minutes. I didn't want to just cut off in the middle of your sentence there.
No, you're good. You're good. So Robert Heinlein, who, like I said, wrote Starship Troopers, which he gets a bad rap for. I don't think he actually believed in the kind of ultra-nationalist stuff that came out in Starship Troopers, but he was just writing a story. He wrote Glory Road, which is a story about a young kid coming back from the Vietnam War and kind of being disaffected with the world. And he meets this lady, and it's science fiction. So this lady turns out to be the Empress of the universe. And he notices as they go along in their story that basically she doesn't do anything. She just listens to people complain. And the problems that they bring to her tend to work themselves out before she even has the opportunity to do anything to fix them. I thought that was a really interesting take on things from a political perspective. That most of the time, it may not be as fast as people want, but things will generally work themselves out, especially when it comes to the market.
Yeah, you bring that up, and you make a good point there, because that is a lot of the problem. I state this a lot, that we tend to blame everything on government, but it is the voters too, and we have a lot of voters who want it fixed right now. We want it right now. Come on, you guys. And every time government speeds up, they throw a piece of legislation together, add a bunch of fat and pork to it, and just whip it through, and everybody passes it to make everybody happy. We get to a point where things are worse than the original issue was to begin with, the old Hegelian dialectic type of thing. But you do make a good. But this is something I think people are having a problem grasping. Not everybody, but there is a good chunk of the population that seems to have a problem with recognizing that because they put these morons in office, they're kind of to blame. You voted for someone who openly told you they were going to spend more money, or the taxes were going to go up, or these things. We're gonna get rid of fossil fuels. You can't be surprised now that gasoline's through the roof when this guy literally told you he was going to do this. He literally said it. He bragged about it. He yelled into the microphone. What the hell are you surprised about? Come on, seriously. And that's the worst thing about it to me, is that the people turn around and act shocked that this could happen, but it's like he literally said he was going to do it.
Yeah,
literally.
And so that's one of those things. Like I think it's definitely a good thing if we get away from fossil fuels in the long run. I don't think that we're like what's her name, Greta Thunberg, the girl from Denmark. So 2035 we go over a cliff, and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and everybody 2035 we go over a cliff, and the actual people that wrote the study are like, no, that's not what we said in the study. But that's who's getting quoted. It's like, no. 2035 is like a big important year. Like that's when we think certain things are going to happen, but it's not like we go over a cliff. We can still come back from it. And so, but if the media just puts Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or whoever up on the screen, and you, or Greta Thunberg or whoever, and that's who you see, that's what you think it says. But doing things like getting away from fossil fuels, yeah, that's probably a good thing. It's going to happen eventually, because eventually we will start running out of fossil fuels in the far distant future. But even then, like, it's going to be harder and harder to get at the fuels that the fossil fuels that are out there, and that will drive energy companies to go, how else can we get this energy that we need? And there will be an economic incentive rather than a government mandate to fix this issue we have. And I would love to have an electric car. I would, right now, I think it would be best if I had an electric car and a fossil fuel powered car, because if I didn't, especially with the price of gas right now, if I didn't have to spend any money on gas, that would be great. Luckily, I currently I'm working IT and I work from home, and I barely spend any money on gas. Like, this hasn't really hit me as hard as some people because I work from home. But I definitely have been watching with interest as the price went, skyrocketed up, and has been slowly, ever so slowly coming down. But there's always a better way to do this. The economic incentive will always be better than a government mandate. I can remember back in the 80s, my dad had a little Dodge Colt that got 40 miles. It was supposed to get 40 miles per gallon. He said if he drove it right on the highway, he would get close to 60. But that kind of engine isn't allowed anymore because it was carbureted and all this other stuff. That just isn't allowed to be made anymore, because most carbureted engines and most engines with this older technology couldn't possibly produce 60 miles per gallon. So the government mandated all these changes, and all that came out of California, and it eventually made its way to the federal government. And all these changes basically took away that advantage that tiny little car had. So now the Dodge that's the equivalent of that today, you're lucky to get 40 miles to the gallon.
Yeah, and here's my thing. I don't necessarily mind if here's my thing. If government would get out of the way and allow innovation to move the market away from fossil fuels, let's say somebody, hydrogen cells or whatever, and let innovation drive the market, I would not care at all if they moved away from fossil fuels and figured out another way to power cars. That's fine. I just don't want the government telling me, here's the insulting thing. These idiots come out and they're like, well, just go buy an electric car. Hey, jackass, have you seen the prices? You don't necessarily, because of your mandates, you haven't exactly made them affordable. And at the same time, okay, well, we're going to get,
by the way, what about the farmers who need a truck? And
yes,
what's the cost of a Cybertruck? Like $90,000, which of course the cost of a regular truck right now is way up. That's a separate issue. That's not because of the cost of electric cars. But yeah, it's another one of those things. Like, all the government mandates and everything that we've had over the last 50 years, since the 70s when they started doing this stuff, Elon Musk has done more in the last 10 years than any of those mandates to get people off fossil fuels. And why? Because there's a profit motive.
Yeah,
he wants to make money.
And you know what? Good for him. I'm fine. I'm fine with that. It's just the fact that in California we're going to get rid of all fossil fuels by a certain year. Hey, moron! You can't even support your electric grid now. How are you going to? Yeah. And so it's one of those things where I have a hard time believing sometimes that this isn't some people's way of just controlling how much you get to travel. Because if your electric grid can't support all the electric cars, and some people can't charge their cars and get to work, well, guess what? You're either hitching a ride with somebody else, or you're not going to work. So that's what a lot of people, when you talk about environmentalism, they get worked up. I do too, because I feel that the people that are at the head of it want to be in control of it, and they just want to make money off taxes or whatever they can. I would not have a single issue with, again, getting away from fossil fuels if you show me a viable option that isn't going to hinder people's ability to travel, to go on vacation, to commute to work, all these things. It's not going to put a giant burden on electrical grids where you either decide you're going to charge your car or run your refrigerator, things like that. That's we're when government pushes the innovation, they don't give car companies a lot of time to do all the research and get everything ironed out. So you end up, it's just like with the high efficiency appliances. The first few years, those things were just junk because it got crammed in their throats, and they had to, oh my God, we got to produce this now. If government would just get out of the way and not try to control, not have these people like, if it's not on a meter, we don't want it type of people like the Rockefellers used to be. If we could get people in government or even in the states that say, hey, we're going to open up to innovation here. If you want to come in and, build a car that runs on water or whatever, let's do it. Of course, now you'd have to go through the EPA, and everybody gets involved, and that's a whole nother thing.
Well, it's not just them; it's the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration and all the other bureaus within the Department of Transportation that have their say on whether or not a car can be made and all that stuff. So it's not just the EPA; there's a whole government bureaucracy. Like, why can't we get? I personally like to drive stick. Why can't I get a truck with a 5-speed or a 6-speed? Why? Because you have to get that approved through both the Transportation Department and the Energy Department, and all this list of government bureaus and everything in order to get that that extra transmission put on the road. So if I'm Ford and I'm making, I live, 10 miles from Clay Como right now, where they make the F-150. And if I'm Ford and I'm going, well, most people don't drive stick anymore. Why would I even bother making one if I'm going to have to go through all this process? I'm never going to get my money back. Why? And I get it, they've got automatic transmissions now where they're more fuel efficient than manuals, but that's kind of a recent development. That wasn't true as little as 10 years ago. So, but you still had a hard time finding a 6-speed back then.
Yeah, it's just because I have a Volkswagen Jetta, and it's got a little 1.4 liter turbocharged engine, but it's an 8-speed automatic, and I average about 42 to 43 miles a gallon out of that car. It's unfreaking believable. Love the car. After I bought it for a little while, I'm like, should I really spent that money? But then when gas went up, I'm like, oh, thank God, because I had a Ford Edge, but before that, and I loved that car. I bought it with 60,000 miles, and I put 280 something. It got up to 280 something thousand before I traded in, and that thing never caused me an issue. But it was only 25 miles a gallon. That thing would eat me alive right now. So I'm thankful for my little VW. But yeah.
So I actually have Ford Maverick, which is their new very tiny truck.
Yeah. How do you like it? My wife's kind of looking at one.
I absolutely love it because it's exactly what I need. Most of the time I need a car. I only need a truck on occasion. Like when I go hunting. I honestly think I may have hauled the first deer in a Maverick
in the country.
Last year. It's possible. It's possible that there was another state that had an earlier season that maybe somebody got one, but I don't know. I didn't see any pictures or anything. But so I may have gotten the first deer hauled in a Maverick last year. I don't know. But yeah, it gets really good mileage. I got the 4-wheel drive one, so it's not the hybrid or anything like that. but I get 30 miles to the gallon, and like I said, I work from home, so that doesn't really hurt me that much. Um, but my fiance drives a Ford Explorer, and she's lucky if she gets 18 miles to the gallon, and she's very lucky that she works about 3 miles from here.
Yeah, that as nice as those Explorers are, yeah, I wouldn't want to own one
Mhm.
right now. It would.
Yeah.
I drive 55 miles one way to work, so
Hmm.
yeah,
Oh my, yeah,
yeah. So I had
yeah.
it's
That
a
is
good thing
what
I.
you need.
Oh yeah, I told her I was like, the thing that I tell you real quick, the thing that irritates me is I stopped at a convenience store here in town one day, and I see this Audi, I believe is an A4 sitting, and
Mm-hmm.
he's sitting at the diesel pump, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know VW and Audi are parent company, sister companies, and
Mm-hmm.
when I came out, I said, "They're diesel in your Audi?" He's like, "Yeah, it's a TDI." He's like, "Well, you know
Mm-hmm.
VW and Audi." I was like, "Yeah, I know they're sister companies." He's like, "Yeah, they put some TDIs in their Audis." And I said, "Well, what's the mileage like?" He's like, "I'll tell you." He goes, "I was driving back from Colorado." He goes, "I averaged 85 miles an hour." And he said, "I still was getting over 35 miles a gallon in this car." I'm like, "Oh." So I told my wife, if I ever get the opportunity to buy an Audi with a
Mm-hmm.
diesel engine,
Mm-hmm.
I'm all in. Say
I
no
thought you were going to
more.
say 85 miles to the gallon, and
No,
I was going to freak out and be like, well, I got cheated. No, all right.
no, I know the VW diesels. Of course, they apparently lied on their emissions here a while back, and that
Mm-hmm.
line's been shut down. But I knew several people that had them said they were getting 40 in town and 50 on the highway. That's
Mm-hmm.
holy smokes. Um, so is there any other topic that you would like to discuss? Something that we haven't covered so far tonight?
Um, oh, I'm sure there's tons of topics I'd like to cover. Well, like I said, one of the things, having served 21 years and all the waste in the military, like the Army's on a spending spree right now. They've decided that they're going to replace the M4 rifle, or the M4 carbine. It's short rifle, and with the new M5. Even though I'm not going to get into semantics of what's a rifle and
Oh,
what's a
okay.
carbine, but
Real quick, is there a difference in the size of the round?
it is a much larger, much higher velocity round.
Okay.
We're basically going back to the 1950s, 1960s battle rifle concepts, except even bigger because the idea behind the M5 rifle is that it's meant to penetrate body armor, and
Oh.
um, so the idea behind it is it's basically supposed to give the infantryman a way to just crack any body armor out there and just go right through and still uh, t- uh, take out the target. Um, and I'm looking at this going, what's the actual use of this thing? Like, as far as like, I get that there are some forces out there like Russian special forces and things like that that have this body armor. And yes, I'm often of the opinion that it's nicer to have a capability and not need it than it is to need it and not have it. That is a maxim in the military. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Um, but what's the actual use case of this? Because there's literally no military force out there that issues body armor out the way that we do. There's some soft armor and stuff out there for the Russians, but like there's it doesn't really stop the 5.56 that's used in the M4. The Chinese would like to get there, but their military is so large it's going to be forever before they can ever field enough. Um, there's a whole bunch of people who'd like to get there, but we're the only, really, us and a couple other NATO members who have very small militaries are the only ones who actually field this. And I just wonder if we're starting off too early, because the whole reason we got away from the battle rifle concept was because the recoil on a battle rifle is significantly more than an intermediate cartridge rifle like the AR-15, M4, M16, and that recoil causes you to have to re-aim for a follow-up shot. Whereas with smaller rounds, you can pretty much keep yourself on. Like, you may move a little bit, but it's not nearly as much. There's a lot less recoil, and it was determined that given the ranges that we typically fought at, that those smaller rounds were good enough. And so we've pushed ourselves to have this capability now for a future enemy that, like I said, doesn't exist. Would it have made more sense to keep developing this over time until we actually had one, so that maybe we could get something that was, maybe less recoil or something like that, when we actually have to face someone, or not even when we actually have to face someone, when there's a potential adversary in the future who might actually field the level of body armor like we do. I think we may have just jumped the gun a little too early, and that we may get stuck with an older technology that we could have improved upon or had something better in the future if we just waited.
Yeah, I'll say this, because if engineers in that field are like some of the engineers that I work with at my job, God help us all. That's all I'm going to say, because holy hell, those people make you want to beat your head off a wall.
Yeah. So as far back as the the M1 tank has a 120 millimeter gun, and I'm going to say this because I used to be a tanker. It started off with a 105 millimeter gun because that was the standard. Everybody in NATO used it, but we knew we were going to need something bigger, so we went to 120. And as far back as the late 80s, early 90s, they were talking about, well, that's not going to be enough. We need a 140 millimeter gun. And Rheinmetall in Germany was working on a 140 millimeter gun. And those engineers were working on that level, whereas the guys making the ammunition were saying, we can make this ammunition better. Give us time. And they literally made the ammunition better to the point where we're still using the 120 millimeter round almost 35 years later. And it's still highly capable. There are stories that my drill sergeants told me back in January 2000 of M1 tanks with the old rounds punching through Iraqi tanks and hitting and killing the next tank behind it. But they thought that it wasn't going to be good enough, and it's just a matter of, like, do we really need the new rifle, or should we be looking at advancing the ammunition? The Army says that, they basically took the ammunition to where it's capable of going, and maybe that's true. But did we maybe jump the gun and go to this bigger round before the technology was really ready, given that we don't have an adversary to use that round for? There's a whole bunch of stuff like that. There's the Army just selected a new, they call it a light tank. Well, they don't even call it a tank. They call it a mobile protected firepower system. It's basically a medium tank. Weighs about 38 tons. That's right in the medium tank range. And the question that I would be having if I were in DC right now is, what makes this medium tank better than the XM8 light tank that uses the same gun and has a lot of capabilities that this medium tank doesn't, like being able to be airdropped in with the airborne, being able to be transported on C-130s, all this kind of stuff. What makes this medium tank that you just selected better than the old XM8 that was approved but never put into production? Why are we spending, and I look at it and I go, oh, the Army is also looking at, this is based on a vehicle called the Ascot, which is from Spain and Austria. It's a Austrian-Spanish cooperation, something or other, and I can't remember the thing. It's based on that vehicle, which was originally designed as an infantry fighting vehicle, which is what the M2 Bradley, if you've ever watched the Pentagon Wars, that's Carrie Elways and Kelsey Grammer. It's a wonderful movie, and they actually held back some. The actual stuff that happened was far worse than what happened in that movie. But the Army would like to replace the Bradley at this point, and what they really want to replace it with is the ASCOD, or this thing that General Dynamics has offered, which is based on the ASCOD. Well, so is this tank. It's also based on the ASCOD vehicle, and it's ASCOD. And so in a couple of years from now, when the Army says that they've selected this ASCOD variant, are they going to use this tank as the basis for their selection? And now we have a family of vehicles. We can share logistics between the systems. They got the same engine, they got the same tracks, they got the same this and that and the other thing. And once that's all done, because the Army has never wanted a light or a medium tank since the end of the Cold War, not really. Are they going to go, well, this doesn't meet our requirements because it's not C-130 capable, it's not airdroppable, like I was mentioning earlier, the XM8 is. It's not able to do all this other stuff that we think we might need a lighter medium tank to do. Let's cancel that. And now we've got a $1.14 billion slush fund for the generals to use for whatever they want. If I were in Congress, those are the questions I would be asking. I know that I would make it a lot more succinct than that, but those, I would probably write it out ahead of time. But those are the questions I would be asking. Like, why are we selecting this tank? What makes it better than the one you already had? And will this just be, something you use to get the thing you want, and then become the funding that's already been appropriated just becomes something you can just spend on whatever else you want?
Yeah, I mean, when they admitted, right around right after 9/11, that how much money did the Pentagon just don't know where it went, that type of situation. I mean, that was okay. So I have another question just came to mind because I heard the audio this morning from, not the complete audio, but the audio from the video in the Uvalde school shooting. Now they took out all the kids' screams.
I did not hear that.
They took out all the kids' screams, but it was video of the cops in the hallways, and the guy that was doing the podcast is like, okay, here we are now at 77 minutes, and now they're going into the room to take the guy out. But here's my thought, because the Supreme Court made a decision many years ago that the police don't have to protect you. They don't have to run into a building and protect you. But what are your thoughts on this whole situation? Because we've talked about, gun control and gun rights. And there's this, there's a push by some that we need to defund the police. And what is your whole thought on law enforcement? And not just in this situation. We have some people that say maybe we need to look at another way of training officers to not use certain tactics, and think, what are your thoughts on some of these things? Because that Uvalde situation, I'm sorry, that many cops standing in a hallway while this guy is shooting people, and they're not doing anything. It just seems like it's it looks like it sounds like it looks like something scripted. Like they're just hanging out in the hallway. One guy goes and puts his hand underneath the hand sanitizer into the dispenser in the hallway. He's sitting there putting hand sanitizer on. What the hell are you doing? So what are your thoughts on this?
This is one of the things that's really perplexed me because, coming from the military, we were always taught to, saying run to the sounds of the guns is kind of a trope, but that's what you do. You go. First of all, you try to get the enemy in a position where they're at a disadvantage. If you can't do that, then you just have to go to where the enemy is. And this is the case where you have to go to where the enemy is. Not that I really want to see police looking at people as in the same way that military looks at an adversary, but this is a situation where they have a confirmed active shooter. That guy's the enemy. You need to go in and you need to neutralize the threat. That is the primary thing to do. And, in the military, we look at it and we say, we accept that there's a chance we're not coming home tonight. And I hear, it's one of those things you hear when you talk about the Second Amendment and things like, when the police are allowed to ask you if you have weapons and disarm you if you have one or whatever, even though it's your constitutional right to have it. Well, I want to make sure I get home at the end of the night. You know what, dude? You chose the job. This is the job. Sometimes you're going to be put in a position where maybe you're not going to make it home. And trust me, in 21 years in the military, there were times where I spent hours in a bunker, making sure that I didn't get hit by mortars. There's not a lot you can do about mortars. There is something you can do about people shooting at you. Like you have to go in. That's your job. And just because the Supreme Court says it's not your job, that doesn't mean that locally they can't say yes it is. The Supreme Court gets to say what people's rights and things are, but your local policy can be different. And this is obviously a problem with the policy in Uvalde. The other thing is, I know that they were trained that way. They were trained to go in. Ever since Parkland, I think that's been the standard across the country. Is that you have an active shooter in school, you go in and you neutralize the shooter. The other thing about that is they were sitting there for all that time waiting for the order to go in. My military brain looks at that and goes, somebody there was a corporal or a sergeant or a lieutenant or something, right? Not just, the chief doesn't have a whole bunch of like patrol officers with no rank or whatever. Somebody there had some rank, and you've got to take the initiative and go, I'm hearing shots, I'm hearing screams, I'm hearing people call for help. We've got to do something now. And those people in the leadership positions, the middle leadership, are just as responsible as the chief. I don't talk about it a lot. I was present for what was it was something called a school shooting. Luckily, it was not really. It was a father who didn't like the fact that his ex-wife was now dating someone else. He showed up to the school. I used to work for a school here in the Kansas City area. He showed up to the school and waited for them to show up, and walked up to the car and shot his ex-wife's boyfriend in the head. He then unloaded his gun, placed it on top of the car, and waited for the police to arrive. It was uncanny, but it was just one of those things where it's like, here I am at the school. I got my gun out there in my car legally, like I'm supposed to, and there's absolutely nothing I can do right now. Those guys weren't in that situation. They had the capability. They had body armor. They had all this stuff. Somebody's got to do something.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I listened to it, and my wife and I were kind of listening to it right before I dropped her off at work today, and I was just like, I was talking to a couple people at work, and I said, if I live in Uvalde, Texas, I'm getting a bunch of people to go to the next city council meeting, and I'm looking at city aldermen, and I'm looking at the mayor and saying, if you don't get rid of every single one of these people, we're going to get rid of them, and we're going to get rid of you. Now, I get it. Here's the thing, and I want to pick your brain on this too, because police are an arm of the government. And there are some in the libertarian movement that say, let's privatize police. What are your thoughts on privatizing police? What do you think about that whole thing?
I think that comes from kind of the anarchist wing of the libertarian movement, because people think that, we can privatize everything. I think when it comes to the police, the courts, the military, there are certain things that you need to have someone who's an impartial arbiter, who theoretically is, paid by everybody and is responsible to everyone. Whereas if you have a private police force, I don't necessarily know that you have that. There might be a way to do it. I haven't seen a good way that someone has described to me. So when it comes to, I'm a minarchist. When it comes down to it, like government, most of the time when it comes down to the question of, Should the government? The answer is no. But there are some things where, having someone who is supposed to be an impartial arbiter is necessary. And I mean, the less power the government has, and the less reliant they are on, certain groups for, their position and their funding and all that, the more likely they are to be impartial. But I don't know that privatizing is necessarily the way to go, but you definitely need something very responsible. I think in Uvalde there was actually a school police force, so it was a separate police force from the Uvalde police force. And in that case, it's your school board that's the big issue. You need to go and find those people. But of course, now we know if you complain too much at your school board meeting, the FBI is going to go look you up. So.
Yeah, and again, this is why a lot of times we preach that people have to get involved in their, especially state down, get involved, find out what's going on in your area, find out, run for city alderman if if you're liberty minded, do these things, and we can, of course, we have to expand on this, but again, okay, let's say. The police departments, all these things, this is why I don't like chiefs of police. I like city marshals, those that are elected. I don't like a chief of police because they're more beholden to the board of aldermen than they are the citizens and these things. But, if people don't like the way their police are policing, then they need to get to their city council meetings and say, hey, are you guys going to do something about this, or do we have to kick you to the curb too? That's just the way it has to be, because if there's,
So I think the problem there is that we're all so wrapped up in the national narrative, because the federal government's too big, and it's too big a portion of our lives, and it's easy to focus on it because it's in that national news. We can all watch Fox News or CNN or whoever, and we can all see that national thing. But the government that should be the most involved in your life, and that should still be a tiny amount, should be your local government, whether it's the city or the county. That should be the one that is most important to you. It shouldn't, when it comes down to it, it really shouldn't matter if it's me or Sam Graves going to Congress. But the fact is, things are in such a way that, honestly, you need me. Sorry. You need me to go in there and work with the Thomas Matthews and the Rand Pauls and all that, and raise hell and raise a stink and try and do something about it. That's not who Sam Graves is. So,
all right.
Yeah, when's the last time you saw him on the news about anything?
I haven't.
There you go.
I haven't. Let me ask you before we go any farther. Do you have a website? Because I got to put this in the description in the show notes. You got a website to go to?
It is maidmentformissouri.com. MAIDMENT 4 spelled out FOR Missouri.com.
Okay.
And I'm not your typical politician who's going to say Missouri just because it'll get me more votes.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to see. I'm trying to think of any other topic that we haven't covered, because you're going for Congress, so I'm trying to keep it more national level. But I still, I still want your thoughts on some of the things that we've done in Missouri and we're trying to get done in Missouri. So I know Thomas Massey put forth a bill, a very simple bill. I don't remember what the bill number is, but his bill was to get rid of the Department of Education. I got to ask you what you think about that bill.
As someone who studied to be a teacher in college, like I said, I got a degree in history. I thought I was going to be a history teacher. I am absolutely for getting the federal government completely and totally out of education. It would be great if we could just privatize education. Again, it's one of those things that's long term, let's get there, because it would be a shock to the system for everybody who's not into it. When I look at how much I pay in taxes every year, And I'm like, I could send my kid to a really nice school for that. And I, like I said, I make a decent living, but I'm by no means wealthy. Um, I just look at the amount of money that we just waste on education. And it doesn't even work. I mean, you run in. So my kid, he lives with me now. He was living with his mother in Florida, and even though there were federal laws on the books tied to federal funding, he was not able to get services that he needed for his particular needs in education. My nephew, my sister had to sue the school, and it cost her a very good chunk of her savings in order to get. And again, this is in Georgia. It cost her a significant chunk of her savings to get him the services that he needed. They eventually got to the point where they just handed her a letter and said that literally just says the words "go away." They got to the point because she was advocating for her kid. It's like we will just pay for your kid to go to private school, and so the state of Georgia pays for her kid to go to private school because they just didn't want to do it. So we have this huge education system apparatus, and it doesn't matter. And I say that knowing that things are not nearly that bad in Missouri. In fact, my son is here. He's going to public school in Missouri because they do take all those taxes away from me. With all that, like, I can now no longer afford to send him to private school myself. But he's getting the services he needs here. But I guess that's, it's just one of those things that kind of proves that it doesn't matter what law you make. If people are willing to obfuscate and make it hard on you, they're the government. They've got all the money they need to keep from having to do the work that they're supposed to do. It just so happens that we have school districts here that are responsive to the people, and actually, you have people, like normal people who are working in those special education roles who want to do right by these kids, that we don't have those problems as much here as they do down in the South.
Okay.
So yeah, if we want to get rid of the Department of Education, I'm all for it. It should be a bureau. The Department of Education should be a small bureau in the VA department that handles the GI Bill.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All right. So is there anything else you wanted to cover before I let you go here? We're just a little over the hour and a half mark. So not to be silly, but the longer I drag on, the less people listen. I like to try to condense it. I love to give a long interview, but after a while, people's their attention spans become a little shortened. But is there anything else that you wanted to cover tonight that I didn't get to, or you didn't get question about?
No, I guess I'll just put in my plug for myself, which is I'm a normal person just like everybody else who's listening to this. I'm not the political class. I served 21 years in the military, and that gives me an insight into that. That doesn't make me special. I guess the things I did over that time might be special to some folks, but that doesn't make me special. I work a regular job. I have kids. They go to school. I'm not a perfect person. I'm divorced. I live the same life everybody else does, and all I want to do is go to D.C. and try to do something to stop the government from intruding into our lives and telling us how to live. I mean, there's a great line from the movie, like I'd mentioned Firefly earlier. If you watch the movie Serenity, Malcolm says, they come around to the idea that they can make people better. I do not hold to that, and that's kind of where I'm at. If you ever ask me what song, it kind of describes my philosophy, it's live and let die. Leave me alone, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that. Just leave me the heck alone. Let me make my decisions, and as long
hmm
as I'm not harming someone else or their property or threatening them, then
hmm
what is the big deal,
the
bro?
the problem is that that's scary. Like
Yeah,
I could fail. That's scary, and a lot of people are scared of that, and that's why they vote for the establishment, the duopoly. And I think that's kind of sad. Like
yeah,
we've made it to the point where if you do fail, it's really hard to get out of that. It shouldn't be really hard. It should be, oh, I failed. All right, let's start again.
absolutely. Well, Andy, I thank you so much for your time this evening. Thanks for staying on with me this long and having a good conversation. And best of luck to you. If you do win, please feel free to come back and join me again, and
Oh,
we can discuss the win and discuss and or anytime you get time, you want to come back on discuss because basically what I'm trying to do is I'm getting through the primaries here. I'm trying to get as many
mhm.
candidates on as I can, but if some of these people win their seats, I want them to come back and discuss. I want them to discuss the process as well, so other people that are running for it doesn't matter what office they might be able to lend some knowledge to people who have thought about running for. It doesn't matter if it's city alderman or governor or state rep or whatever. But I'd like to give people insight onto what they did, how they did it, and so we kind of help other people who may, freedom lovers who decide to run for office later, maybe help them and give them some knowledge on things that worked and didn't work and so on. So, but again, thanks so much. Best of luck to you, and hopefully I get to talk to you again a little later on.
All right, I appreciate it. Like I said, first interview here, and I know that we're kind of on the same side. That makes it easier, but I really appreciate you even giving me the chance because most places just won't.
Yeah, that's the thing about being a libertarian. You kind of just get poo-pooed right off the bat. No matter they don't even give you a chance to speak. They're just like, "Oh, he's one of those guys." And I know
Yeah.
that's another thing I like to try to do is the candidates that don't get a lot of camera time or radio time. I just like,
Mhm.
come on, I'm not going to hold you to certain topics. Just let you talk, and then people can make up their mind from there. But again,
Mhm.
uh, greatly appreciate you coming on with me tonight. Have a great weekend, and hope to talk to you again soon, Andy.
All right, thank you.
Take care, man.
Bye.
Bye. All right, folks. Well, you all that live in District 6, you can make up your mind if you like Andy or not. I'll leave that up to you. He's not in my district, so I can't vote for him. I am going to give you a little insight into a thought that I had after some things have transpired. And I know that, last week I had on Brandon Wilkinson. And I had him on, and we discussed his thought on should naturalized citizens be able to vote. And at first he said no. And he had a conversation with another gentleman who's actually going to be running for office, and he's trying to get me lined up with this gentleman. I can't think of his name right off the bat. Well, another gentleman that I interviewed a few weeks ago, Dustin Hill, was still putting out that this guy is unconstitutional and whatever. And I've had a chance to talk to Brandon some more, and I'm just letting you all know. I was going with Dustin. I pretty much switched to Brandon. I mean, I'm going to be straight up honest about it because I don't like the tactics, and I don't like I don't like what Dustin did. I'll just be honest. I don't like what he did. I don't like how he went about it. And I've got to, again, I had a conversation with Brandon yesterday on the way home from work. I had a chance to talk with him more. And that's just kind of an update. Now, again, you all in my area, you do whatever you want. I'm just telling you my reasons for this. I don't, I don't want people into dirty play being in office because it's just easy. I feel it's easy for them to get sucked in to the dirty mess that's in D.C. I don't like it. I don't like it. So that's just where I stand on the whole thing. That's my 2 cents. But yeah, I'm kind of disappointed in Dustin, to say the least. Not real thrilled about that. What transpired, but anyway, that's my thoughts. Now next week, I'll get this right. I'm going to have on, excuse me, Sherry Tolson Reese, and then the week after that, on the 29th, I'm going to have on Catherine Moody Dreyer, I guess is her last name. She is also a libertarian. She is running for state rep, and she is also a libertarian. So I will have her on the 29th. So Sherry Tolson Reese will be on with me next week. Catherine Moody Dreyer will be on with me the week after, and we'll finish out a whole month. This is the first time in the entirety of this podcast or any other podcast that I've done that I have filled a month with guests. And I thoroughly enjoy it. Now that the primary season is getting ready to be over with, now I'm out looking for other groups, people from other grassroots organizations to come on here with me and discuss the kind of things that they do. So I'm asking my audience, live stream, downloaders, radio, however you hear this, if you know of someone in a grassroots organization who is fighting for the cause of liberty, especially here in the state of Missouri, please email me, message me on Facebook, however you can get a hold of me. Make a comment in the section here on YouTube. Let me know of these people. I will get in contact with them because I know I enjoy interviews more than just going over the news. And I think my audience enjoys, I think it's a more interesting show when I can interview people and I can introduce my audience to more liberty lovers and freedom fighters. So if anybody's got an idea out there, hit me up, let me know, and I will do my best to get them on here with me. I did contact someone from I think it's the Missouri Freedom Institute. Now, they're into... They specialize in taking on cases, fighting for freedom and stuff. Now, I did watch an interview that this one gentleman did on ABC 30 or something on a show. I really liked what I heard from the guy. Man, he knows the Constitution of Missouri, of the U.S. He really knows his stuff, and I'm really hoping to hear from him and get him on with me to discuss some of the court cases and some of the things that his group does, to get him a little, get more people involved and helping him out. So I am working on that. But again, if anybody has a group, a person in mind that they'd like to have to hear on this show, please contact me, and I will be more than happy to get in contact with them and try to get a date and time for them to come on and discuss all things freedom and liberty. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks to all of you again who download, watch the live stream, listen to me on the radio. Greatly appreciate each and every single one of you. You guys make this easier. The audience is continuing to grow. The download numbers look great. So we must be doing something right. And I mean we, because I know some of this is word of mouth. Some of it's my friends who are at the radio stations or the internet networks or the people on the live stream. So I can't do it without all you guys, for sure. I can't do it by myself. And you guys have been a great help to me. So anyway, have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe. And let's keep pushing for freedom and liberty here in the state of Missouri. Good night. Thanks again, Warrior, Class 3, Ganai, BH, Patrick, Voodoo Queen, all of you that joined in on the live stream tonight. I think Casey Rich was in here for a little bit. So all of you, thanks for hanging out with me again and asking good questions in the comments and everything else. Thanks, Voodoo and Warrior Class 3. Appreciate those nice comments from you guys. Sherry Tolson Reese next week, and then Catherine Moody Dreyer the following week. I think me and Catherine are gonna get along great because I guess she was, after I invited her on, she was watching some of the videos, saw the bass guitar in the background. She's like, "Do you play bass too?" Apparently, she's big into bass guitar. So this could be a fun interview because while we're not talking about topics that affect Missouri, we might be talking a little bass guitar. So that could be an interesting interview. But anyway, I got a big old 12.5-pound brisket in the smoker right now. I put it in right when I got home, and that bad boy's going to smoke overnight and into tomorrow. Got some friends coming over. We're gonna chop it up and some hoagie rolls and some provolone cheese. Can't freaking wait. I think my stomach's already like screaming at me. Oh, Andy, thanks for coming in on the end of the live stream, brother. Appreciate it. So anyway, that's going to do it this week, folks. This week, folks. And again, greatly appreciate everybody that came on and commented and had the questions. You guys make my job a lot easier because you guys bring up stuff that I don't always think about. So have a great weekend, everybody. Eat some good food. Maybe consume your favorite alcoholic beverages or just beverages in general. Enjoy some family and friend time.